If you could have one superpower, just one, what would it be? Flight, invisibility, or would you go for the really heavy hitter, the ability to see the future?
It's the classic question, isn't it?
Mhm.
And honestly, I think most people, especially anyone in business, would pick the crystal ball.
Oh, absolutely.
The ability to know what's coming next is, I mean, that's the ultimate competitive advantage.
Totally. Imagine knowing exactly what your sales will be next quarter or
Yeah.
or when a trend is about to die out. You'd be unstoppable. But since my crystal ball is currently in the shop,
And mine too, I assume.
we have to rely on the next best thing.
Which is, arguably more reliable than a crystal ball anyway.
Right. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the forecasting process. And before you roll your eyes and think this is just about, guessing or boring spreadsheets, let me stop you. This isn't staring at tea leaves. This is about survival. It's about strategy.
Exactly. We're working from a presentation by Jitendra Tomar titled Overview of Forecasting Process. And what stands out immediately in his work is that he doesn't frame forecasting as magic. He frames it as a rigorous, structured, a framework.
Yay.
It's not about being a fortune teller. It's about being a data analyst.
So our mission today is to decode this process. We're going to walk through the 5 specific steps he outlines. And by the end of this, we want you to really understand how organizations prepare for change, how they figure out where to put their money, and how they make wise decisions.
And that's the key phrase, wise decisions. Let's start with the definition because I think people misuse the word forecast all the time.
Yeah, good idea.
According to the source, forecasting is predicting future outcomes using data analysis. Specifically, it's analyzing historical data to spot trends and estimate future events.
And that applies to everything, sales, demand, finances. But why does it matter? I mean, why go through all this trouble?
Well, the source highlights 3 massive stakes here. First, resource allocation.
Okay.
You just need to use what you have well.
Hmm.
You don't want to hire 50 people if demand is about to drop.
That sounds a bit like corporate buzzword bingo resource allocation. But practically, that's huge. If you're a manufacturer, that means what? Buying raw materials.
Exactly. If you forecast demand too low, you don't buy enough steel or plastic. You have idle machines. You have customers screaming at you because you're out of stock.
That's a huge failure.
A huge failure of resource allocation.
Yeah.
And on the flip side,
You buy too much.
right, you have a warehouse full of inventory that's just gathering dust, tying up cash that you could have used for R&D or marketing. So accuracy isn't just a nice to have, it's directly tied to your cash flow.
Okay, so that's number 1. What are the others?
Second is strategic planning. You need to predict market conditions to steer the ship. And third, gaining a competitive edge. I mean, if you see the curve coming before your competitor does, you win.
It's the difference between surfing the wave and, well, getting crushed by it.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think when people hear forecasting, they immediately want to jump into the math. Open Excel, look at last year's sales, and just draw a line going up.
And that is the classic mistake.
Yeah.
If you look at the framework, that's not step 1. If you just jump into the math, you're already lost.
So what is step 1?
Step 1 is define the purpose. It's purely strategic. Before you crunch a single number, you have to clarify the objective.
It's like planning a road trip. You don't just get in the car and start driving.
No, you need to know where you're going first. The source emphasizes clarity. You need to understand the forecast's specific goals. And crucially, all the stakeholders need to be aligned.
Alignment seems tricky. I can imagine the marketing team wants one thing from a forecast, and the finance team wants something totally different.
Oh, it happens all the time. Marketing might want a really optimistic forecast to motivate the sales team, right? Set a high bar. But finance, they want a conservative forecast to protect the bottom line and make sure they have enough cash reserves. If you don't define the purpose and the KPIs, the key performance indicators, right at the start, you're building a model that serves no one.
A Frankenstein monster.
Exactly. You're building a Frankenstein.
If that makes sense. The source also mentions scope and granularity here. I feel like granularity is a word that gets thrown around a lot. What does it actually mean in this context?
It's about the resolution of your data. Think of it like a camera lens. Do you need a wide-angle view looking at the whole year? Or do you need a macro lens looking at daily sales?
Can you give me a real-world example of where people get this wrong?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a grocery store manager. You need to know how much milk to stock for next Tuesday. You need high granularity daily data.
Right.
If headquarters sends you a forecast that just says, we expect milk sales to be up 10% this quarter, well, that's useless to you.
Right. You can't stock shelves with a quarterly trend. You need to know if the milk is needed on Tuesday or Friday.
Exactly. But conversely, if you're the CEO of a car company deciding whether to build a new factory for EVs, looking at daily sales fluctuations is just, it's noise, it's distracting.
You need the big picture.
You need the macro view yearly trends over the next decade.
So step one is essentially, what decision are we trying to make and who is making it?
Yes. The source list's impact as the third pillar here. You have to identify the key decisions, budgeting, strategic planning. If you can't articulate how the forecast will actually inform a decision, you probably don't need it.
Okay, so we've defined our purpose. We know we're trying to figure out, say, how many widgets to build next year, and now can we do the math?
Not yet. Now we move to step 2. Gather and analyze historical data. This is what I like to call the raw material phase.
This seems straightforward. You just get the data, right? Download the CSV.
You'd think so, but the source describes this as a much more active process. It calls it detecting work. You aren't just collecting numbers, you're analyzing them for specific things, trends, patterns, and outliers.
Let's break those down. Trends and patterns. They seem similar. What's the difference?
A trend is a general direction sales are going up over time or down. A pattern might be seasonality sales always spike in December and dip in February. But the tricky one, the one that kills forecasts, is the outlier.
The anomaly.
Right. Let's say you're analyzing sales data for a bottled water company. You see a massive spike in sales in September 2022. If you just feed that into a computer, the computer thinks, okay, people love water in September.
But maybe there was a hurricane that month.
Exactly. If that spike was caused by a hurricane, a one-time event, and you treat it like normal consumer behavior, your forecast for next September will be totally wrong.
You'll have way too much water.
You'll overstock massive amounts of water for a hurricane that isn't coming. The detective work is realizing, that's an outlier. I need to clean that.
So you have to actually look at the story behind the numbers.
You have to understand the underlying drivers. Why did the data do that? Was it a promotion? A competitor going out of business? A viral TikTok video? If you don't know the why, the what is dangerous.
And the source also makes a big deal about data accuracy.
Cleanliness is key. You have to cross-reference sources and clean up inconsistencies. If your historical data is full of errors, maybe someone typed an extra zero or a system crashed, your forecast will be garbage. It doesn't matter how fancy your math is later on. If the raw material is bad, the result is bad.
So you have to be a bit of a janitor for your data before you can be a visionary.
That's a great way to put it. You're scrubbing the data to ensure its integrity.
Okay, we have our purpose. We have our clean, analyzed data. Now we get to the engine room. Step 3, select and apply a method.
This is where it gets really interesting because the source offers a menu of options. It's not one size fits all. You choose the method based on the data and the accuracy you need.
And it breaks these down into 2 main camps, qualitative and quantitative. Let's start with qualitative. That sounds a little fuzzy.
It sounds fuzzy because it relies on the human element. The source lists, expert opinions, and market research. But just because it's human doesn't mean it's not rigorous.
So when would you use this? Why wouldn't you just use hard data?
You use it when you don't have history. Let's say you're Apple and you're launching the Vision Pro. You have 0 historical sales data for that product.
Right, nothing to go on.
You can't use a regression model because there's no data to regress. So you have to rely on asking the veterans in the sales department, hey, what do you feel is going to happen? Or conducting surveys. No amount of math could predict the sales of the first iPhone before it existed.
Okay, fair enough. But then, of course, we have the quantitative methods, the hard math. This is where the source gets a bit more technical.
Right. It highlights a few specific techniques here. It mentions time series analysis.
And it throws out some terms, ARIMA and exponential smoothing. We need to decode these. They sound like Star Wars droids.
They do, don't they? But the concepts are actually pretty intuitive. Let's take exponential smoothing. It's a fancy way of saying, what happened yesterday is more important than what happened 6 months ago.
So it's about weighting the memory.
Exactly. It assigns a heavier weight to recent data. If you're forecasting fashion trends, what sold last week matters a lot more than what sold 5 years ago. Exponential smoothing accounts for that.
Okay, that makes sense. What about ARIMA? That sounds more complex.
ARIMA stands for
LA?
Autoregressive Integrated Moving Average.
Bless you.
Thank you. But here's the plain English version. ARIMA looks at the momentum of the data and the errors of the past. It looks at the difference between what we thought would happen and what actually happened, and it uses that error to correct the next guess.
So it's a self-correcting mechanism. It learns from its own mistakes.
In a mathematical sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have regression models, which are all about finding relationships between variables.
It cause and effect.
Exactly. For example, finding the mathematical relationship between temperature outside and ice cream sales. If the temp goes up 5 degrees, sales go up 20%. That's a regression. You're proving that one thing drives the other.
So you have the human gut check qualitative and the hard data crunching quantitative. And I think the coolest part of the source is what it suggests next. It doesn't say pick one.
No, it advocates for the hybrid approach, the best of both worlds.
I like that.
This is a major insight. The source explicitly advocates for combining qualitative insights with quantitative data. You run the algorithms, you get the model output, but then you sit down with the experts and say, does this look right?
So the computer handles the volume, but the human handles the nuance.
Exactly. It leads to refined accuracy. Maybe the algorithm predicts a steady rise, but the expert knows a competitor is launching a better product next month. The algorithm can't know that. The hybrid approach catches those blind spots.
Okay, so we've built our model, we've used a hybrid approach, we have a number, a forecast. Are we done? Can we go to lunch?
Not even close. Now comes the reality check. Step 4, evaluate and refine.
The report card phase.
It is. But the source is very specific about how we grade ourselves. You don't just say it was good or it was bad. You use specific metrics. It mentions MAD and RMSE.
Okay, MAD is mean absolute deviation. RMSE is root mean squared error. Let's break them down for the listener who might not have a stats PhD.
Sure, MAD is a simple one. It just asks, on average, how far off were we? If you predicted 100 and sold 90, you were off by 10. You just average all your misses.
Straightforward. What about RMSE? Why all the squares and roots?
The key word there is squared. When you square a number, big numbers get really big. 2 squared is 4, but 10 squared is 100.
Right.
So RMSE is a metric that punishes you for big mistakes. If you're consistently off by a tiny bit, your RMSE will be low. But if you're mostly right and then 1 month you are massively wrong, the RMSE will just explode.
So it's a way to flag dangerous volatility.
Exactly. If you're in a business where a massive miss would bankrupt you, like an airline hedging fuel, you care a lot about RMSE. You want to avoid that disaster.
The source also distinguishes between accuracy, bias, and error. I used to think those were all kind of the same thing.
They aren't. Think of an archery target. Accuracy is hitting the bullseye. Error is how spread out your arrows are. But bias is fascinating. Bias is when all your arrows are hitting the top left corner.
You're consistent, but you're consistently wrong in the same direction.
Exactly. If you have bias, it means your model has a structural flaw. Maybe you're a systematically over-optimistic. You're always predicting 10% more than you sell.
Yeah.
That's a bias.
And you can fix a bias differently than you fix an error.
Right. If you have a bias, you can just tune the model down. If you have error scattering all over the place, you might need a completely new method. That's why step 4 is called evaluate and refine. You use these metrics to diagnose the engine and fix it.
So it isn't just about giving yourself a grade. It's about diagnosing the problem so you can make the model better next time.
Precisely. Which leads us perfectly into the final step. Step 5. Monitor and control.
The feedback loop.
Yes. The source emphasizes that forecasting is not a one-time event. It is a continuous cycle. You can't just set it and forget it.
The world changes too fast for that.
Exactly. Step 5 is about tracking. You are continuously comparing your performance against actual results. The assumptions you made in January might be garbage by March. A pandemic hits. A supply chain breaks.
So you have to constantly adjust.
You're navigating with a map that has to match the territory. The source also mentions control measures.
Which sounds a bit authoritarian.
It just means having a protocol. Like, if our forecast is off by more than 5% for 2 months in a row, we automatically trigger a review. That's a control measure. It stops you from drifting too far off course before someone notices.
It's all about continuous improvement.
Yes. The model should get smarter over time. If you aren't learning from your errors in step 4 and applying them in step 5, you're just making the same mistakes forever.
So let's recap this journey. We started with defining the purpose, then gathered and analyzed data, the detective work. Selected a method, hopefully a hybrid one, then we evaluated our accuracy. And finally, we monitor and control the process forever.
That is the roadmap, from strategy to execution to maintenance.
It really takes the mystery out of it. It's less about gazing into a crystal ball and more about, well, disciplined management.
And that brings us back to the mission we talked about. The ultimate goal isn't perfect prediction.
It's not.
No, perfect prediction is impossible. The goal, as the source states, is informed decision-making and risk assessment. A forecast that's 100% accurate is a fantasy. But a forecast that helps you understand the risks, allocate resources better than your competitor, and have a plan B.
That's incredibly valuable.
That's the win.
That's a really healthy way to look at it. It takes the pressure off being a magician and puts the focus on just being prepared.
Exactly. It's about minimizing regret. If you know there's a high probability of a demand spike, you can reserve extra capacity now. Even if the spike doesn't happen, that was a wise decision based on the data you had.
You know, what sticks with me most is that hybrid approach. We live in a world where everyone is obsessed with AI and algorithms. We think the computer is always smarter.
It's true. We tend to devalue human intuition.
But this source, fundamentally a business presentation, explicitly says, don't throw out the expert opinion.
It's a powerful reminder. The data can tell you what happened, and it can project that line forward mathematically, but it can't read the room. It doesn't have intuition. It doesn't know a cultural vibe is shifting until that data is already in the system.
So perhaps the future of forecasting isn't just about getting better data or faster computers.
No. It's likely about getting better at the synthesis. The best forecasters of the future will probably be the ones who are most skilled at listening to the algorithm and their own gut instinct at the same time.
A cyborg approach to business strategy, the raw processing power of the machine, guided by the wisdom of the expert.
It's the only way to navigate a complex world.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. You don't need a crystal ball. You just need a clean spreadsheet, a clear purpose, and the willingness to check your work.
And maybe just a little bit of intuition.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.